if I stumble on anything, just take it hard. I took a lot of time doing my notes. I haven't listened to classical music, so I hope that would help. Anyway, my topic today that I will be speaking of is the effects of raising the minimum wage. Let me start off by asking, how many of you here have jobs? And how many of you once had or has a job that pays minimum wage? Alright, so if the minimum wage rose while you were working, you would probably think that was pretty sweet, right? You know, like everybody would want more money. But the thing is, most of the time the minimum wage doesn't necessarily mean that it's good for the people. It sometimes hurts more people than it actually does help them. I believe that raising the minimum wage will result in an adverse effect on the economy. I also believe that because raising the minimum wage causes adverse effect, employers will be forced to pay more for the labor they were receiving. And in doing so, they have to compensate by means of either shifting the cost to the average consumer, that means us, laying off current workers, or by reducing the amount of hired employees in a given year. So the consequences of increasing the minimum wage includes 1, higher rates of inflation, and 2, higher rates of unemployment. So let's talk first about inflation. Now, for those who don't know what inflation is, inflation can be described as a decline in the value of money. That means a loss of purchasing power. So when the price level rises, each level of currency, which means each dollar, is able to buy fewer goods and services. Alright, because raising the minimum wage forces employers to pay more for the labor they are receiving, they may sometimes try to recoup those added expenses by shifting those expenses to the average consumers by increasing their prices. Those increases in prices may cause our dollar to get less bang for our buck, meaning we as consumers end up having to pay more dollars for certain products. According to statistics by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the recent nationwide minimum wage increase from $5.85 to $6.55 in July 2008 has caused the Consumer Price Index, that CPI is used to measure inflation, to increase from 218 points to 219 points in July. That 1 point increase may not sound like much, but keep in mind that this index is on a national level, so that 1 point increase translates to 0.5 increase in the rate of inflation, just in that 1 month alone. So to recap the first point, raising the minimum wage will result in a higher rate of inflation. And now going on to my second point, unemployment. Depending on the wage increase, the minimum wage will sometimes result in an increase in the higher unemployment rates. According to research by David Newmark, a research associate for the National Bureau of Economic Research, and William Webster, a senior economist at the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, their report indicates quite strongly that in the least regulated labor markets in the sample, namely the U.S., the U.K., Canada, and Japan, minimum wages reduce employment. This implies that increase in the minimum wage will cause further unemployment and will reduce the amount of jobs being created. Because teenage workers make up the majority of minimum wage paying jobs, studies by the Minimum Wage Study Commission concluded that a 10% increase in the minimum wage reduces teenage employment from 1% to 3%. According to the data collected by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the teenage unemployment rate spiked from 20.3% in July 2008, the month that the minimum wage was increased, from 18.1% a month prior to the increase. So that's like 2% increase in that 1 month alone. So because raising the minimum wage has apparently increased the teenage unemployment rate, we can also assume that raising the minimum wage reduces the amount of potential entry-level jobs that could be created. The increase in the teenage unemployment rate from June 2008 to July 2008 means either two things. One, teenagers are getting laid off from work as a result of the minimum wage increase. And two, jobs are cutting back on the amount of people they are hiring. So to recap, raising the minimum wage will cause employers to seek compensation by either shifting the prices to us, the consumers, that means inflation, or laying off current workers, or reducing the amount of hired workers in a given year, that means unemployment. So if politicians continue to boast about their plans on raising the minimum wage for the good of the people, keep in mind that, as evidenced by statistics that were mentioned earlier, rising the minimum wage will not necessarily mean it will be good for the people. It could mean the exact opposite. Thank you.